2024. Before we begin, allow me to express my gratitude to each of you for your presence here today. The role of the press is invaluable in disseminating information and fostering dialogue, which in turn will advance awareness of the beneficial programs of the Ministry of Housing and Water. After the address by the ministers, we will have a dedicated question and answer segment, and this is where you get an opportunity to seek clarifications, ask questions, and gain deeper insights into the areas which were discussed. And as we proceed, I'm requesting your cooperation to have your mobile devices set to silent mode. When it is time for questions, kindly wait to be recognized before speaking, and then state your name and the media house that you're representing. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Your participation reflects your commitment in keeping the public informed and engaged. Without further delay, let us welcome Honorable Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Colin Crowell, and Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water, Ms. Susan Rodriguez, to share their valuable insights and updates with you. We'll now begin with Honorable Minister Susan Rodriguez, who will proceed first. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, PS. And thank you to the members of the media who were here this morning and who responded to this invitation. Let me also take a moment just to wish all of you a happy and prosperous 2024 to you and your families, and also to all Guyanese who are tuning in this morning. It is always a great pleasure for me to speak about the housing and water sector. So we welcome this opportunity this morning to update the media as well as the country on our housing program, on the status of our water sector, and on the achievements that we've made over the last 3 years. But in order for us to really appreciate the significant progress that we've made in these last 3 years, we have to measure the distance that we have come. So how far have we come? And so I would like to go back just a little bit to present the scenario to you, to put into context what we inherited in 2020, where we are today, and then later on you will get more of the details from my colleague, Minister Crowell. So I will present an overview of the sector, both the housing and water sector, and then we will get into the details later on. The housing program under the People's Progressive Party Civic and the APNU AFC coalition are incomparable. One is riddled with failure, that is the APNU AFC coalition government under their government, and one is of remarkable success. And this is not only within the last 3 years under our government, but from 1992 all the way to 2015, where we were able to deliver over 100,000 house lots to the people of our country. We saw during the 2015 to 2020 period the decline of the housing sector under the previous government. The ministry was reduced to a department under the Ministry of Communities. We saw that there was no clear housing policy, there was no vision for the sector, and there was no major investment in creating house lots for allocation. And I've said this to the public before, that obviously if you have a plan to create house lots, you have to make investments, you have to ensure that resources are available. And we saw for 3 years For the first 3 years of the previous administration, they made no capital investment into the housing sector. So obviously, you will not be able to create new house lots or open new housing schemes. And even when a budget was earmarked, they were incapable of spending it. And you can check the media reports from the year 2016 when the previous government earmarked about $5.8 billion for spending in the housing sector. They were only able to spend 12% of that budget for that entire year, 12%. I make that point to say that today, when we speak about the achievements, not only in the housing sector, but across the government, we often hear the argument that this government can do that because we have unlimited resources or increased resources. But even the resources that they had during their time, they were incapable of spending. And so they willfully utilized the monies that were available. And this comes from a clear lack of vision. And it's a demonstration of pure incompetence. So during that period, the 2015 to 2020 period, the previous government allocated 7,534 house lots. Our party campaigned on a manifesto that clearly set out the vision and the objectives for the next 5 years. That is to take us to 2025. That is a blessing for us, and I'm always very grateful that we were given that document, because we were able to say to the people long before we came into government what our vision is for this sector, housing and water sectors, and for all of the sectors. And so once we assumed office in August of 2020, there was no time, no downtime to figure out what the policy is or what the program is going to be for the next 5 years. We knew beforehand the commitments that we made to the public, and so that's why we were able to hit the ground running immediately. And we have a short period to get a lot of work done. 50,000 house lots in 5 years has never been done before. So there was no time to spare, and no time to wonder how do we proceed or what do we hope to accomplish in the next 5 years, because the vision was clear and the policies were clearly set out in our manifesto. So I'm going to touch briefly on each of the commitments that we made in these sectors in an overview way, and then we'll get into the details later. So of course, like I mentioned, we promised 50,000 house lots in 5 years. Therefore, that means one of our first commitments was to create 10,000 house lots annually. And there are several components to ensuring that this happens. There's a process. You have to acquire lands to develop into housing schemes, and we were able to acquire approximately 51 new areas by CHPA and the government of Guyana, so some owned by the CHPA and some by the government of Guyana for the period August 2020 to 2023, and this is for new housing development. Of course, our planners have to design these housing schemes. We have to survey the land, do the designs, transfer these lands under the ownership of CHPA or government of Guyana, and then we make our allocations. So far, we've allocated about 28,368 residential lots, but the inclusion of other categories, that is residential, commercial, religious, open public spaces, etc., that takes us to a figure of over 30,000 lots. We have maintained over the last 3 years, a consistent 40% allocation to women only. So I believe this year is about 2023, it was about 43%, and that has been consistent. And by income, when you examine the allocations by income, a combined low, moderate, and middle income lots accounting for 92% of our total allocations over the last 3 years. So that is significant, and that is in keeping also with the objective of the housing program. That is to ensure that affordable housing is provided to all Guyanese. We continue to invest in support infrastructure in existing and new housing schemes. That is the second promise that we made in our manifesto, and you have seen our budgetary allocations from central government increase by over 1,000% in the last 3 years, as this program continues to provide subsidized housing. And in the case of low-income lots, the house lots are subsidized by up to 90%. So the beneficiary only pays about 10% of the costs to develop that house lot. And that is when you take into consideration all of the infrastructure work, the electricity, and the water distribution network that the government subsidizes. The third commitment we made was to reverse VAT on building materials. This was completed almost immediately when we took office in 2020, and the value-added tax was removed from locally produced building and construction materials. Later on, we also removed VAT from sheetrock and concrete boards, and cement was subsequently zero-rated as of April 2022. So this is also to facilitate the affordability of home ownership, because one of our main focuses in the housing sector is on home ownership. Even though we have a mandate to create 50,000 lots, we also committed, and this is the fourth manifesto promise, to facilitate affordable financing for home ownership. And through the collaboration with banks, you have seen that this has resulted in reduced interest rates at these mortgage institutions, thereby giving people more access to financing and affordable financing. And this, you also have to appreciate the context in which this took place, because we know globally, and as a result of COVID and other factors globally, we have seen interest rates rise as a result of high inflation. But here in Guyana, we have actually had reduced interest rates. So the government also facilitated the review of the NBS Act, which enables the society to raise its mortgage ceiling and to offer lower interest rates on higher mortgages. So people can now build a bigger home, a more comfortable home, and still benefit from those reduced interest rates. We also, through the GRA, facilitated the raising of the mortgage interest relief ceiling from $15 to $30 million, and this gives first-time homeowners tax deduction on their income tax statements at the end of the year. So I encourage, it's a fantastic measure. It's not one that we speak about often, but for those first-time homeowners, this is available to them, and they can get this tax deduction from the GRA annually. They can claim back all of the interest they paid on their mortgage during the year. The fifth promise we made on the housing sector was to promote home ownership, particularly among youths and young professionals through tax and other incentives. And we just spoke about some of those incentives to promote home ownership. But we also have the housing construction program through the Ministry of Housing. And as I said before, this was not a commitment that we made previously, before we came into government, the construction of homes, but we understood very early that if we want to promote occupancy in areas, we should start by building homes, and also that gives us the opportunity to utilize economies of scale to make home ownership more affordable, especially for our low-income earners. So that was the logic behind trying to construct as many houses as possible. And now we have long lists of people who are waiting for a house because they recognize that the most affordable way that they can own a home is through the housing program, because if they have to build a home of similar size and quality, it will cost them more. So we wish we can build more houses, but we're also in a tight spot in terms of contractors who are available and willing to participate in the housing program. The President also announced the steel and cement subsidy, which helps first-time homeowners to commence construction. The value of this, along with the minimal cost that they pay on the house lot, accounts for the equity payment at the banks. And so that equity requirement is no longer required, that down payment, in many cases. I know, for example, at NBS, there's no equity required for you to qualify for a mortgage. And there are many other housing support initiatives, such as the Let Them Housing Support Initiative, where the President announced $600 million to 600 families to get them started on a home in one of our existing schemes in Let Them. We'll get into the numbers a bit later. And the sixth and final promise we made under housing was to promote partnerships and incentivize private sector involvement in the sector. And I've touched on this also before in speaking about private contractors, our collaboration and our working relationship with contractors who are building homes, as well as contractors who are participating in our national infrastructure program. We have about 20 contractors who are building homes, majority of which, maybe 99%, are local contractors. Similarly, for those executing infrastructure works. We also allocate lands for commercial and industrial developments in our housing schemes, and this helps to create jobs in those housing schemes and also help in the overall design of the sustainability of that scheme. The Building Expo was also returned in 2021, I think. 2022, sorry. And just out of COVID, we wanted to bring it in 2021, but of course, we were still at the height of the pandemic. So we've had that for 2 years now, and it's been remarkably successful. Guyanese families enjoy visiting the expo. We have a lot of foreign companies as well as local companies that praise the expo for giving them a platform to launch their businesses. And I was even more pleased to learn from medium-scale business owners that they credit the success of their new businesses to Building Expo, because it gave them a unique platform to launch and to network. And we see a lot of companies that are very faithful to the Building Expo brand, and they return and they support us every year because we have been consistent in what we offer at Building Expo. And so when you visit the Expo, it represents, you witness everything that we represent in the housing sector. You see what, on display what we're doing under the Government of Guyana program, and the private sector also have the opportunity during the Expo to market their businesses and to offer Guyanese a wide variety of building and construction materials, and to offer new technology for home construction. So the brand is good, and we will continue to offer this expo on an annual basis. So I'd like to move now on to the, forgive me for going on a little bit, but this is the housing and water sector, which Minister Crowell and I could sit here for many, many hours and still would not be able to complete all of the line items under these two sectors. But going across the GWI for a little bit, I have elaborated many times to the public, the state of the Guyana Water Inc. in 2020 when we took office. The company was bankrupt. The company received no subvention in 5 years under the previous government, so it owed the Guyana Power and Light over $7 billion. The bank balances held by GWI had reduced by $1.8 billion. Operational costs had increased by $1.1 billion. There were 2 bank overdrafts totaling $270 million, and over $800 million were owed to suppliers. So this was the state of the water utility company when we took office in 2025, and this state was created under the previous government. There were overpayments to contractors for works not yet completed, procurement breaches, such as in the case of the Sequest water treatment chemical for a value of $1.8 billion, which was sole sourced. There were a backlog of outstanding water connections because the company had no inventory. There were no meters, no fittings, no spares. And all of the spares purchased prior to 2015 were depleted and were never replenished. Hence, thousands of backlog of new water connections. They were unable to make those connections because they simply did not have the materials to do it. There were over 5,000 major reported leaks across the country. So the infrastructure network was in a total mess when we came into government. The expansion of field staff, there was a huge expansion of field staff where we saw a doubling of the staff complement from 2015 to 2020, from 600 to about 1,300. But no maintenance was being carried out on the water treatment plants or wells to the extent that untreated water was being distributed from the treatment plants. So that was the state of the company. So what happened after? The company is now, and I'm pleased to report, is now in a stable and solid financial position. There is no bank overdraft. There are no outstanding debts to suppliers. We have solid bank accounts. We are constructing a new office. We have invested in the training of our employees. We have increased salaries for our technical staff. We have invested in protective gears, in new rigs to drill wells in-house, which saves us a lot of money. We have been enhancing our capabilities across the sector. So in a nutshell, that sums up the result of all of the actions that we have taken over the last 3 years. We've cleared the backlog of outstanding service connections. We have fixed all of the leaks, but this is an ongoing process, of course, as leaks develop in the system. So maintenance is something that we have paid careful attention to, and we always need to pay even more careful attention to the maintenance of our distribution networks. The water sector, therefore, is performing well financially because of prudent and efficient management. We have reduced corruption and restored accountability and transparency, as all contract awards are made through the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board. Service delivery has been improved nationally, and the implementation of our strategic plan to deliver treated water to 90% of our coastal population will be completed by 2025. Now, just briefly, some of the commitments we made in the water sector in our manifesto. Access to potable water currently stands at 97.3%. That's nationally. Over the last 3 years, more than 35,000 residents nationwide received first-time access to potable water. One of the first commitments we made was to ensure that water rates remain affordable. Immediately when we took office, VAT was removed from water. The previous administration, and I don't know if many people recognize this or remember this, but the previous government, APNU AFC, raised water tariffs twice in 5 years, in October 2018 and in October 2019, resulting in an overall increase of 100% in water tariffs. In 2021, our government reduced water tariffs by 5% in keeping with our promise to ensure rates remain affordable. Additionally, the announcement was made by the President that the increase in fuel prices, which is our main operational cost, will not trickle down to customers of GWI, since the government would be absorbing the increase. So this increase was not passed on to our customers at GWI. The second commitment we made was to reinstate the water subsidy to pensioners. Today, over 28,000 pensioners are benefiting to the tune of $523 million annually, fully subsidized by the government of Guyana. The third commitment we made was to expand treated water for more areas. This is guided by our Water and Sanitation Sector Strategic Plan 2021 to 2025. And this is also in pursuit of our United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6, access to clean water and sanitation by 2030. I believe that we will achieve this by the year 2025 here in Guyana. The plan charts a course over the medium term for the provision of essential services and the development of the potable water supply sector. Crucial areas of focus include increasing access to potable water supply for coastal and hinterland communities, increasing treated water coverage to 90%, reducing non-revenue water, which includes the upgrade and replacement of the aged distribution mains in Georgetown, and the modernization of the sewage and wastewater infrastructure. At a higher level, or at a more humanitarian level, this plan aims to contribute to the reduction of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, as well as the realization of Agenda 2030 by promoting sustainable consumption and production. And we have seen investments in this particular promise that we made. We have commenced the construction of 7 new water treatment plants. We have commenced rehabilitation and upgrade of 12 existing plants and installation of 10 small inline treatment systems. We have also secured financing from the Caribbean Development Bank for the construction of 5 additional water treatment plants. So the combination of these interventions will see the improvement in the water treatment from 52% to 90% by 2025. Of course, as I mentioned before, we continue to upgrade the distribution and transmission of water in urban, rural, and hinterland areas. That was another commitment that we made. And we also committed to reducing losses in the distribution system. Water losses reduced from 69% in 2020 to 62% in 2023. Meter coverage has moved from 53% in 2020 to 67% at the end of 2023, with the installation of 55,000 meters across several regions. This aids, of course, in the conservation of water resources and reduces non-revenue water. And the 6th and final commitment under the water sector is to create the institutional mechanisms to rationalize the country's water resources through an integrated water resource management framework within our 5 years in office. By 2025, we are hoping to implement an integrated water resources framework, which will be facilitated through the establishment of the National Water Council. We are actively engaged in discussion on the creation of this Water Council, which will be a semi-autonomous body and will be responsible for the management of all water resources and the water resource policy for all subsectors. It will be the sole body to determine the institutional architecture of the water sector in Guyana. And turning briefly to hinterland water, we have increased the water supply in hinterland communities from 46% in 2020 to 82% at the end of 2023. We have successfully drilled over 60 new wells, mostly in hinterland and riverine communities in the past 3 years. And to put this into context, the per capita investment, if you look at the per capita investment and you make a comparison, for the period 2015 to 2019, the investment in the hinterland was less than $10,000 per person. The government of Guyana, under our government, is investing more than $34,000 per person in the overall hinterland from 2020 to present. In some cases, the per capita investment is more than 7 times that in the APNO period. So I believe that both sectors, the housing and water sectors, have lived up to its expectation. We have seen unprecedented growth and achievements in both sectors. I'm very proud of the work that has taken place over the last 3 years. I'm very proud of the people who are in the sectors. And we will continue to grow our targets. I have to say that because we've actually accomplished all of the promises that we set out to accomplish in our manifesto. Some are continuous commitments, so we have to continue to deliver more and more house lots. But in terms of the policy framework, we know what the policy is, and we see a demonstration of commitment to those policies through the allocation of resources and in getting the work done and in getting more and more people allocated their house lots, in helping people to achieve home ownership, in ensuring that we deliver clean and safe water to Guyanese, both in the coastal areas as well as in our hinterland areas. So we have successfully accomplished all of the commitments that we set out to achieve, and we will continue along the same lines and maybe in an even more accelerated pace in the next 2 years to ensure that all Guyanese are satisfied with the work in our first term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Susan Rodriguez, for giving us a broad overview of the ministry's work before, what obtained before, and what has been accomplished so far based on the government's manifesto. At this point in time, I'd like to invite now Minister of Housing and Water, Honorable Colin Crowell, to make his presentation on the ministry's accomplishments, achievements, and the way forward. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary Kupin. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, very good morning, and let me start out by wishing all of us a happy new year. I want to recognize, in addition to the head table, the number of program heads here, including for GWI, led by the CEO of Guyana Wating, Mr. Sheikh Bash, and for Central Housing and Planning Authority, Ms. Denise King Tudor, who is acting as for the CEO, who's on leave. It's a pleasure to meet you this morning and to provide an opportunity for an overview on a year recap as to how we've been performing and to give you an insight of where we are going. So having heard the presentation from Minister Rodriguez, you might ask, well, what's left, right? But as we said, housing and water is a huge sector. But I want to start off by reminding all of us our overarching guiding principle is in this document, which clearly sets out our minimum, not our maximum, our minimum parameter as for our fulfillment as a government in this sector. And then, of course, you have added policies, programs, and measures that are introduced to supplement our manifesto commitments. And so let me start off by briefly giving you on the housing sector what's happening. First of all, we need to recognize the level of investment that is happening in this sector. And that is required, and that shows government's commitment. Because in fulfilling all our requirements, it's very easy to say, yes, we have achieved 30,000 allocations. And it's very easy to say, let's identify a land and divide it and allocate it. It's far, far from that. The practicality is that it has to have matching resources to be provided to enable us to do as quickly as we have been responding. And so when the commitment was made 10,000 annually, and that's what's stated in our manifesto, so that's how we get 50,000. When the commitment is stated 10,000 annually, that is given in the context to recognize that for 5 years, just use 2015 to 2020, the housing sector saw about $22 billion investment. If you use our last 3 years, and I'm not even using the partial 2020, our last 3 years, meaning inclusive 21 to 23, we're talking about over $102 billion. Therefore, we're speaking an investment in the housing sector of at least 464%. that is how we are able to respond, to be able to have ongoing infrastructure works or complete infrastructure works to over 40 new housing areas since we're in office. That's in 3 years. Compare that to 3 areas that were developed in 5 years between 2015 to 2020. That's the success story of the housing sector. And so we are on the right path in ensuring that we are able to meet our obligations and our commitments. But in addition to the investment in the housing areas, also sees the investment for road networking, opening of new access, increase the traffic flow, ingress and egress, ease the congestion, reduce traveling time on the road, reduce overburden and cost, heavy costs for persons who have to wait long time in the lines. So in addition to our investment for new areas, and I just said to you over 40 plus new areas, to date, we have for highways, we have completed over 23 kilometers of highways, spending at least $25 billion. When you take into consideration our 2 new awarded areas, which will include the current extension, well, the ongoing Schoonard to Crane 4-lane, which we are expected to be completed sometime by the end of this quarter, first quarter, and you take into consideration the new extension that has been awarded, that is for Great Diamond to, well, Diamond to Bosby Dam Craig. Those 2 combinations are about $22 billion investment that sees overall on completed highways and current highways on the infrastructure, we have investment of over $47.4 billion, 37 kilometers of concrete or an asphaltic concrete highways. So that measurement also does not take into consideration where we have commenced, the project team have commenced the design work for the another extension, which we'll see from Bosby Dam Craig that goes to Landon Canaan, and then from Landon Canaan to Soosdijk. So in-house, we have started that work by the project team. And I want to acknowledge here too the work that is being done by all the staff, but more particularly infrastructure. Because you don't see really for housing sector, for us advertising for consultancy. Designs, all the designs are done in-house. Implementation, oversight are done in-house by the project team of the Central Housing and Planning Authority, which saves, therefore, millions of dollars, and, well, I should say hundreds of millions of dollars for us if we have to recruit consultancy to oversee many of these projects. And we'll come to the separate. And so that will tell you what is happening on the infrastructure side for our achievements for housing areas, to be able to satisfy the requirement to provide an access and a house lot for allottees, and that is where we are at this point in time. And of course, allocation exercises will continue, and that we're aiming to have at least another 10,000 this year. So when we speak about allocations, the ones that you normally see are the residential house lots allocations. So let me clarify, so for the members of the media, you may want to ask how we're to 30,000. So when Minister Rodriguez alluded to the 28,368, those are for residential house lots. But our total allocations as of this to date, since we're in office, is 30,000 468, when you take into consideration our commercial, residential, commercial, industrial, and the regularization allocations. Now, that must be taken into context, where in 3 years we are 30,000 plus, versus in 5 years you have 7,534. And what is to note, the category for allocations, majority of the allottees were females. In fact, males alone, standalone allocation was 27%, 45% for females. That tells you a story, and that tells you about opportunity for all segments of our population. And another interesting fact to note, of those allocations, using the recognized standard of age for the bracket for youth, meaning 35 years and younger, 53.3% were allottees that are 35 and under, meaning 15,119 of those allottees are young people. And so that, when Minister spoke about the manifesto commitment and about promoting home ownership, particularly aiming youths and young professionals, that is what we're also speaking about. The highest bracket of those allottees, the income category, as you would expect, is the low-income bracket. 43.3% of the low-income persons were allotted of that 30,000 house lots. And then if you want to include the next category, moderate, we're speaking, and middle, that's about 29 and 19% respectively. So below the high income, for analysis purpose, of the 28,000 house lots allocations, percentage-wise, 92% are below high income. And that is another point to note, to understand that we are also working and aiming to ensure that we bridge the gap. And that is where our majority of our applicants are. And that's what we have been responding with. The other comment or update I want to give you quickly in terms of the allocation exercises is that we have, noting some of the comments, because I know you'll ask, I hit these issues head on. We have noted some of the observations, some of the criticisms, some of the comments that have been alluded in terms of our allocations. And I must say this, we have deliberately, in keeping with the announcement that was made by His Excellency the President and the Vice President separately, we have been targeting 2019 and prior. That is our target we are on now. However, what we found after those announcements, you had persons turning up demanding that who were before 2019 to be allocated. The fact is, though, it has to be matched on availability of land. So, for example, our recent allocations within the last year or year and a half for Region 4 has been East Coast. That is because East Bank of Demerara, we have allocated, or we have reached to the saturation point of our available land on the East Bank of Demerara. So all the allocations that you've been seeing ongoing are on East Coast, for East Coast of Demerara lands. So that must be taken into context. And similarly, Region 3, because of where the heavy or pending applicants are between Region 3 and 4, that's where we have responded by region to our applicants. The other thing I want to give you an update on is in terms of our housing program. Allocation was our commitment to the people of Guyana. Nowhere stated there did it state housing. But as a government, to fast-track home ownership, to also to help for persons who, because we are professionals in our own right, people don't necessarily have time to be able to have some cases, hassle of contractors, etc. We have housing construction as a major arm of our housing program. And on houses alone, we have, for completed houses, I'm not giving you what's in the pipeline, for completed houses, we have invested over $8 billion if you quantify the houses that have been completed. I am speaking, therefore, of over 1,165 completed houses in various brackets. So, for example, again, let me give you the scenario. Our highest completed bracket for houses, as you would expect, is the low income. 580. The next category, moderate income, 370. And despite all the requests and the glamour and the news we see, completed young professionals to date is at 89. So do the comparison and we'll understand. And then under the adequate housing, which we'll speak a few minutes, we have completed 82 of the core homes program. And that does not take into consideration our ongoing hinterland program. Hinterland, we have ongoing commitment of 300 houses, hinterland houses, in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. And when I refer to hinterland on those numbers, I'm not referring to the LETEM houses, because the LETEM, we have captured that on our general coastland housing program, and that's a special program. But we have 300 houses, and already we have completed over 44 of those hinterland houses. And as you'll recognize, the hinterland housing program, for the listeners, it's different from the coastland. The coastland goes through a pre-qualification process and it's paid for by the beneficiary. In the hinterland program, that's born from our allocation of the capital resources or the housing funds. So that's built for the beneficiaries in the villages. In terms of the core home program, because you would have heard of we have met a program, the adequate housing program, and none of us at this head table is pleased to say that this program is still ongoing. And so we want this program to be completed by the June of this year. But committed on this program says construction of core houses, the subsidies, that's what we call home improvement, and then infrastructure works. We have spent over $3.1 billion already on this program. It's being implemented through the Inter-American Development Bank, so it's a loan, so obviously we have to repay it. But there were some initial challenges that we met, which we have had to address frontally. And that is, one, the core houses in terms of the cost, and because of the nature of the program where the beneficiaries reside in identified or approved communities, then the contractors were not benefiting from what you have in terms of called economies of scale. So if you're constructing a house in a housing scheme, then as a contractor, you have economies of scale because you're dropping off your materials, etc., or location, or your staff, or the labor staff at one location. So the transportation cost is consolidated versus somebody who is constructing a house on one village to the next. And so you'll realize we were not able to have those houses tendered. We tendered twice to be brought in at the cost that we were looking at. Nevertheless, we have met with the bank and we have refined the cost, and that program is now moving smoothly. And so one can find we will have the completion of the rest of the core houses for which the beneficiaries, so who want any other beneficiaries to come on board now? The beneficiaries actually were dealt with before we came into government. So that's why I said we're not pleased about the rate or pace at which this program was and is being implemented, but we believe we have had measures in place to ensure that we can complete the project this year. And for the home improvement subsidy, we've been able to get an increase, approval of increase from 500,000 to 750,000. So that's where we are with the adequate housing program. Now, in terms of our regularization, relocation, unregulated areas, our position has been consistent. That is, no recognition to any new settlement, any new squatting. We have been consistent in saying this. However, what we have been doing is we have recognized and we have the database of what exists in the system and what we met. So, for example, when we came in, we met 21 recognized informal settlements. To date, we have completed exercises on 13, and we are targeting 28, another 8, sorry, for our 2024 program. And that's where we are at with our regularization program. And when we say regularization, because I think at another section of media probably was misconstrued. When I say regularization, it would mean not necessarily that you regularize where you at, but it will mean, can also mean relocation. So it means we have taken stock of the persons who occupy the particular area, we have engaged, we have numbered the structure, we have put the persons through the system. They have to go through the system of being able to be like a pending applicant. So obviously, if there is someone who has another allocation and is squatting, will not in no shape or form be recognized. So that's what we mean when we speak about regularization. And likewise, in keeping with the similar theme that we are working on, over this quarter, our major focus will be, as announced last year by His Excellency, that is the removal of the entire riverbank of Demerara, on the Demerara River, somewhere in the vicinity, one would say probably about Herstelling, going all the way up to Diamond. We have numbered those persons. We have engaged all those persons. We have allocated most of those persons for those who are getting the land. We have also sent to the bank for those who are interested in the housing program. All of these have been done already by the Community Development Department. So that is why I said it to be taking up our time, our engagement over this quarter, because now that we have done this initial task, we will now move aggressively to address those persons. And similarly, you would have heard an announcement by His Excellency yesterday to address the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, because in our opinion, the Soesdijk Highway per se has gotten out of hand, and so we are in collaboration, that is from us at the Ministry of Housing and Water through the CHPA Community Development Department, in collaboration with the Lands and Survey Department, will be immediately addressing a number of areas that we have existing on the highway for the purpose of consolidating. And then, so you would have heard the creation of, first of all, 500 lots for a relocation process for some of the, quote and unquote, established areas that you know on the highway. And when we get to Silica City in a few, you'll recognize this is also important. Our board continues to work diligently and over time. In fact, with the imminent full implementation of the single window processing unit, it will then now require the board of CHPA to be increasing their meeting by 100%. So normally, on a norm, they meet once a month for their meeting, and then they also have another meeting for approvals, but they will have to double this up because in the nature of the single window we'll see increase inputting or increase applicants that has to be channeled through the single window. And so, for example, for over the last period since we are in office, they have approved close to 3,000 applicants. Silica City, work is ongoing. We have, first of all, we have completed with the Guyana Lands and Survey Commission the survey for 3,100 plus acres of land, and this is part of the first phase. And also, as part of the first phase, now we'll see the advancement or the movement for the construction of the first 100 houses or more, but we're starting off with that. The land preparation is complete. They have also completed the expression of interest, and so it's now at the stage where they're reviewing those persons who, the contractors who have expressed an interest for the construction of the houses. That's where we are with that program. And similarly, we have, as the government of Guyana, we have partnered with the University of Miami to develop a comprehensive master plan for the Silica City. When I say comprehensive, will mean obviously an enlarged area where we, for example, on our draft plan right now, we have a total area looking at about 12,000 acres. All right, so work is ongoing in terms of the Silica City, but physical-wise, you've seen land clearance last year, but you'll see construction happening as part of this year's program. And the last thing I want to mention on housing for now, until you ask your questions, we are pleased to say that for both, and it is both agencies that will benefit, the construction of our head offices, so the Ministry of Housing and Water head office, which will continue to have the Central Housing and Planning Authority in the building, and very next to that building, construction has also commenced for the head office for Guyana Water, Inc. So both buildings are located, if you're driving on the 4-lane heading to Echoes, it's on your left-hand side at Houston. So commencement, the works have commenced and it's ongoing, and we are expecting by the end of this year to be fairly complete in terms of those buildings. So that's where we are with the housing. Allow me quickly, therefore, I know you're waiting a long while, to allow me quickly to brief you on the water sector. In terms of the water, I want to make this very important point. When we got into office, the immediate task for the GWI and us as a government was to undertake a comprehensive study as to where we are, and likewise to present a roadmap as to what is required to achieve the benchmarks that you just heard. So for us, we are operating on the 2021 to 2025, what we call a water and sanitation sector strategic plan. And the overarching focuses include, one, to ensure, of course, your full access to potable water on the coastline. And note I said 2025. Access in terms of the hinterland, that will mean all villages, so 100% access. Increase the water treatment coverage. So you just heard that we are about 55%. This means with the level of investment that we're making already, so you have 7 treatment plants that are under construction. You have 5 that are currently being tendered. So that closes somewhere around the end of the month, I think, or the first week in February. That's 5 new treatment plants. And to supplement that will mean the inline filters, a number of upgrade of inline filters, as well as, upgrade of existing treatment plants and new filters. That will bring us to 90% minimum by 2025 for treated water. Another focus is for a reduction of our non-revenue water, which therefore includes removal or changing out of many of the aged main pipe system that you see in Georgetown. So those of us who traverse on, for example, by Bank of Guyana or the Cenotaph, oftentimes you see leakage there. You go by Pegasus, oftentimes you see leakage there. Well, right now you see the road is disrupted between Lamaha Street to Pegasus. That is, we have just changed that pipe system. So they're about 90 to 95% complete because they have to finish the connection. But the changing out of our main transmission lines is integral for us here on the Georgetown program, because even now, GWI cannot increase the pressure for Georgetown if we don't change out some of these systems. So may I remind you, we've completed the changing out from Shelter Belt to somewhere about East Street. We've done a portion from Coffee Square along Cemetery Road. One portion did start that we met, which same thing Minister Rodriguez just spoke about, but we've completed. That's on Republic Avenue in Bel Air Park that goes to Lamaha Street. And so right now, as part of government's widening road program, integrally involved is GWI, for example, not too far from here, the Dennis Street. So because of the widening of the road, we have to relocate those pipelines. Integrally involved by GWI is also the widening of the Berbice Road, because on that program, obviously, has to see relocation of transmission lines. And then, that's one aspect of the transmission lines. The second aspect of the transmission lines, which you will see in this year, for which we already have majority awarded, is to support the new treatment plants or the upgrading of our water systems in the regions or in the communities. That means, with that means, we are putting in new transmission main lines because we are bolstering the capacity. So let me give you an example of what is happening in terms of wells. Right now, for example, we have about 14 wells that are being drilled on the coastline. That's roughly about $1.4 billion investment. We have completed 7 wells since we're in office, and these are major wells. That's at least about another $7 million investment. In order to satisfy the new areas that we have coming on stream through the Ministry of Housing, through the CHPA, and in order to increase the level of service being received in some areas now, we will have, as a part of our gap analysis, will require us at least within the next year or year and a half to drill at least 24 wells on the coastline. I make this point to let you understand that the requirements are to satisfy the water sector for government's plan to achieve this by 2025 requires heavy investment. And already, so for example, already in 3 years, over $26 billion, this is expended, we have expended in terms of the water sector, a 234% increase over the previous 5 years. That will let you understand and know that we are addressing some of the water, all of the water complaints that we currently receive within the system. And the final point I want to make in terms of our strategic plan is also for the modernization for our sewage and wastewater infrastructure. This wastewater treatment, this will take up another upcoming focus of ours. In fact, we have, in prior years, we have done initial studies in this regard, what is required. But we are now going to be embarking on an updated pre-feasibility study. So it means that we had one, but obviously the population increased, the demographics and the new infrastructure in place. We are going to be embarking on an updated pre-feasibility study for the implementation of our first or our pilot waste treatment plant for here in Georgetown. All of this is therefore geared to reduction of poverty, unemployment, remove inequality, as well as, while we are aiming for 2025, we will achieve by 2030, which is part of what we signed on to, our Millennium Goal, SDG 6. And I have all the figures, I have a file for you, but I don't want to bore you further. Saving except to say that you can be rest assured that while there is impatience by our population, and that's understandably, because at the end of the day, all of us are citizens. When we get off from work in the afternoon, we want to be able to turn the tap on in our yard or turn the tap on at our kitchen sink and must have running water 24 hours. That is what we desire. Your government is on the path to ensuring that will happen. However, patience is required because we have started the investments already. One, the whole investment on the treatment plant is to remove the quality, that color of water that you see in your home, or if you're living further in Region 2, the level of the iron content is very heavy. If you go to Charity, you'll see the level of iron content that exists in those water. That will remove that aspect to ensure that we can drink from the tap safely. And finally, as part of our water program to address here, you would have heard His Excellency spoke, I think, a little on it yesterday, and that is the Hope Canal, because the opportunity that exists, obviously, for the catchment, the new catchment that we are even building out in our new housing areas, will be able to satisfy once come on stream. So proposals have been received and submitted. In fact, GWI has already, from the technical level led by the CEO, has already reviewed some of those proposals, and that's now at the level of government. That's where we are in terms of the Hope Canal, because from that, obviously the spin-off from that, once a decision is taken on the necessary proposal or the modality, then funding will flow. Thank you so much for coming out today. Of course, to you, the members of the media, our work cannot be complete without your support that you've continued to provide to us at the Ministry of Housing and Water. And I know one media personnel did reach out to myself to say, whenever we have an activity, we always invite the media, so what new do we have to say? But it's important that we look at the bigger picture as to what is to come on stream, because sometimes we get bogged down with the minor details or issues, but you can be rest assured we are working hard every single day supported by these members, led by these members, to ensure that we can bring a little better level of service and a quality of life to all our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Colin Crowell, for your presentation on the programs, the initiatives and achievements of the Ministry of Housing and Water in both the water and housing sectors. At this point in time, I'd like to invite members of the media to ask you questions, but as a preface to that, as I indicated before, you will identify yourself and the media house you're representing. And please, if the question was asked before, please don't repeat it, so we can give some consideration to the time. Thank you. So, first question.
Kurt Campbell.
Please go ahead. Your name? I'm sorry, could you repeat?
My name?
Yes.
Kurt Campbell, Newsroom.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Ministers, based on the information you provided, 30,000 house lots distributed between 2020 to 2023. But could you say specifically how many were distributed in 2023? And I know Minister Crowell spoke about a number of those lots being on the east coast of Demerara, but could you provide some information on what is happening in the other regions? And quickly on GWI, 90% treated water on the coastline by 2025. We were at 52, I think, in 2020. Could you say how far along are we at this stage?
All right, sure. Thank you very much. So let me go by region. And as I said, we live this daily, so we can speak from our head. Starting with Region 1, we have been able to receive through Guyana Lands and Survey Commission, because Region 1, for Mabaruma particularly, land is scarce there, and because the land there are more owned mainly by two principal persons, two principal families, and Lands and Survey themselves, for which leases have already existed. But we have another 17 plus acres of land that we will be developing in Mabruma. In Port Kaituma for Region 1, over the period, there's an area in Ornock called Ornock that land was allocated to central housing. And over the period, the persons were allowed to occupy those areas. And as a result, we have persons who have encroached and who are occupying. So currently, the survey is being done for the occupancy there, and then we'll be able to move in terms of Region 1. For Region 2, for example, we have done 2 areas since we got into office, and that is for Onderneming Phase 4, as well as for Charity, which is called Buxton St. Joseph. And for example, so let me give you some. For Region 2, for example, in this year, well, you asked about this year. This year, total allocation on the 28,000 plus, right? Because remember, I added the commercial, residential, and the regularization. This year is 8,578 to be exact. When I say this year, I mean 2023, right? Region 4 by breakdown was 7,128. Majority of those are on the east coast of Demerara. Region 3, 1,079. Region 5, 125. Region 6, 192. That's this year figure. For Region 3, in terms of allocations of what is happening, we will have an increased focus in Region 3 for housing program. Currently, we have the Edinburgh, Lenora area that a number of persons will be constructing houses, and expected to come on stream would be the Wales development area. That is going through its final stages in terms of design, and that will be part of the Region 3 program for housing for us. That's probably where the new area for Region 3 will come. Region 4, we have other areas on the east coast of Demerara, but for East Bank, we have, at this point, we don't have any new areas for Region 5. Region 6, for example, Region 5, we have established areas such as Baltiok, Shieldstown, etc. But there's a demand or there's a clamor for persons who are more in proximity, the Bath or the central area where the RDC is located. So we are working to get additional lands there for Region 5 for future development. And don't forget, this end of Region 5, we are looking to develop one other area somewhere close to Fairfield. I think we're very close to get additional land. The lands in Region 5 are not under Gaisuko per se, but it is under the Region 5 Authority, MMA. Region 6, we have two major investments that will come on stream for infrastructure. The Palmyra area, for which the first set of houses, like what we said for Silica City, will commence in the Palmyra area. That's for houses at this point in time. A new housing area will be developed at Molson Creek. Currently, with Lands and Survey, Guyana Lands and Survey Commission, they're identifying that location, the land particularly. But there is also a heavy demand in the applicants for persons who are closer, well, Palmyra is close, but persons who are close to New Amsterdam. And you recognize because of the business hub and the government offices, etc. So we are exploring to be able to find additional lands beyond New Amsterdam, areas such as Glasgow, etc. And that's where we are at for Region 6. But we have completed, for example, 200 houses in Region 6, and we'll be starting with the high-end houses at Palmyra shortly, very shortly. Similarly, like as I said, at Silica City, they have already done the assessment. Region 7, Bartica, the new area that we have identified for Region 7, somewhere around, it's very close to the airstrip, so that will be more 5 to 7 miles. Similarly, we have identified for construction of houses, and we have also completed expression of interest, so that will be part of our work program for this first quarter, and we will be conducting an outreach to revise some of the pending potential applicants for the houses. We did have an activity 2 years ago, but we believe we need to update or refine it. Region 8, the challenge continues for land in Region 8 because most of the land at Mahdia proximity are mined out lands, but Lands of Survey Commission is of the strong belief that we'll be able to get land there very shortly. And do not forget too, we have one housing area that was developed in Mahdia, for which, for a portion of time, went beyond the norm, I should say, because the local authority there was allocating lands. And so we are arresting that situation, and that's being addressed currently. Region 9, well, LETEM will continue in terms of, we have sufficient land for Region 9. You recall we developed a new area called by Poke Bridge. And similarly, the housing program, the subsidy program alluded to by Minister Rodriguez, that persons within that location now are able to access that program, so they're able to build on that. Region 10, the York area has been, because initially we did have an eye on an area, but then it's called Millie's Hideout, and everybody will say, including the locals in Region 10, will tell you that has potential for other minerals, and so we have had to relocate our plan. So we're currently developing the York area for construction of the first set of houses. You might recall His Excellency had committed the 1,000 house program, and that is going to be implemented by the end of 2025, be rest assured. So that will tell you we'll be going on an aggressive program commencing very shortly. And also with, like Bartica, will be the Central Housing and Planning Authority team will be conducting an updated engagement with the potential beneficiaries. Why do I say so? Most of the beneficiaries for the professionals within Linden comes from within the RDC as well from the medical fraternity because of the Linden Hospital that you have there. So there are persons who have gone, persons who are coming on stream who are now able to potentially earn. So that is, in a nutshell, our regional program for regions 1 to 10. How confident are we in terms of our finding land? We are very confident. And similarly, we have also to come on stream to support our funding would be the access through the Saudi Arabia funding, and that is going through its evaluation stage in terms of the technical side, and then we'll be able to fast track even more infrastructure work to enhance new areas for persons to access. What was the question on water?
Minister, before I go on to water, just so that there's no confusion, could you please give the total number of lots allocated in 2023? And based on everything you've said just now, are you saying there were no allocations in 10, 9, 8, 7, and 1?
So the total allocation, yeah, no, I got to update. Yeah, I got to update. So on residential house lots, the type where you see by Dream Realize, etc., that's 28,368 in total. The commercial, residential, commercial, industrial type of activities, that will be 637 plus 22. Regularized lots, meaning persons we had to move and put into areas for regularization purpose, that's another 1,445. That's how we got the total for the 30,468. And for this year, 8,578 of the residential type lots. But for regularization this year, right? So if you want to add the totals, 9,612. Residential, 8,578. And then you add the residential commercial type lots, probably another 181, roughly another 860 for regularization. So they've done a lot of work to deal with unregulated area this year, which will take you to 9,612, meaning 32% of the total allocations we have done to date. What was the question? Oh. So the real assessment of the progress we have made for the treated water, you will start seeing that by the first half of this year. Through our upgrading of current systems, so for example, ECHLS. ECHLS, right now, the previous production was 5 MLDs. Now it's potentially, it will be 15, but now it's about 10 MLD. That's why, because there are 3 storage tanks that has to be constructed, but we are now waiting for the completion over just prior to Christmas. We activated 2 of those storage tanks, and so that's why we're about 10 MLD. And that is why persons in the proximity of ECHLS were able to get water within that vicinity. So the 55% we've given you is, we've only achieved 3% since we're in office. And that is because the investment that is required. It's not like you just drill a well and then you see changes. These are huge infrastructure. So you have 7 treatment plants, new treatment plants, for which, as I said, by the first half of this year, you will start seeing those completion. And with each one of those treatment plants also have new wells that have been drilled to supply those plants. You have 5 new major new treatment plants, as I said, that are being tendered now. So reality, that should be complete by the end of next year, because we'll be pushing the contractor by the end of 2025. And then the ones that you see the immediate improvement is inline filters. they have inline filters right now that we have contracts ongoing for, as well as upgrades. So that's why in my comment a few minutes ago, I asked for patience by our residents, villagers, homeowners, because we have already set on stream the investment that is required to bring the level of satisfactory service that we all desire.
Thank you, Minister. Next question.
Hi, good morning. Svetlana Marshall from News Source. Minister, we've received reports of persons being issued house lots in the sense that they've been assigned house lots, the numbers. However, they have been unable to access those lands or sign agreement of sales because the areas are still under development. Could you say if the ministry, if it's true, maybe, or how many areas are still under development, in a sense, under development?
All right, so you have to understand how what we met and what happens, and that's in how the allocation exercises are done. Because of a backlog that we met, so we met about 70,000 pending applicants in our system, and just for information purpose, in 3 years we have 13,000 plus new applicants that have come into the system. But because of the backlog, what happens is that we have the allocation exercises that are done, and then you have the infrastructure work. But the infrastructure that is required for those areas that are allocated obviously has not been able to reach on par. So, for example, let me give you a practical example. You would have seen over the last month or month and a half, and today, coincidentally today, those tenders are opening, that those areas that are opening today were all areas that have been allocated in 2023, for which will form the policy guideline for the allocation of resources that are required in this year. And so that is what guides us of the level of resources that are required to keep our program going. So, for example, of the 30,000 that we speak about 20,000 of those would have been able to access or see their land. Currently, for example, on the East Bank of Demerara, there are a number of blocks, because persons always post. They're asking about Grove Diamond, popularly persons ask there. For example, by the end of this month, they're currently doing what is called the PALs for those areas, meaning they will be able to access those lands. So you will see flooded on our page over the upcoming weeks, persons being able to access the area because those were persons who were allocated and we've completed the infrastructure.
Sir, are you saying about 8,000 plus applicants have not been able to access their lands due to ongoing development?
Correct.
The other issue, sir, you spoke about the riverfront along the Demerara riverfront, and I think that had to do with squatting, and you said that the entire area would be cleared. Could you say how many persons are likely to be affected? And I know that you mentioned about the new housing schemes the President spoke to, but where some of the other areas they'll be reassigned or relocated? And another question, throughout 2023, and even the Vice President spoke to this, where persons are using alternative, if I could use that term, channel to access lands through CHNPA. Could you say if, what's the magnitude of this issue, and if any of CHNPA employees were sanctioned and or dismissed throughout during 2023 as a result of malpractice in the allocation or the issuance of house lots? I'm trying to coin it the best way I could. And you spoke about the backlog, you spoke about 13,000 new applicants. What is the existing, how many active applications are in the system?
So let me deal with the issue on the employees aspect. We have, and it's ongoing, it's an ongoing process. When staff, we have delinquent staff or culpable staff, they are dealt with. But allocations are not dealt with by lowest level staff. I want to make this point very clear. Allocations are done at the level of the land administration aspect. What you had recently, what the one accusation I have seen was, as you said, basically called, I saw the term used, bumped up, right? Bumped up, and that is why we have put some additional measures in place. One, persons who are following up on their application, they don't have to come to see any of the officials you see here. There's an inquiry, you can do this online. There's an online. This we have done, introduced over 2 years ago. So online, for change of your information, inquiries, name it, that can be done online. Secondly, we have put 2 additional staff in front, so we don't have space, so you normally see some containers there. That, well, of course, air-conditioned, but we have 2 staff there that are taking note of persons who, and these are recent interventions I'm speaking about, right? So these are new measures that are taking note of persons who are following up their applications. So when that is finished, weekly, they take a note of those, and weekly that is submitted, and we have to do checks to see if these are all applicants, etc. And that is why I was willful to mention that as a deliberate policy, we are moving to ensure that we are able to satisfy 2019 and prior. So you won't have all of this, oh, I'm 2016, 2017 got before me, all of that. And the other thing is, what we have noticed, and this is a fact, as a minister, somebody will come, I walk everywhere. Persons will come to say, I'm a pending applicant, etc. You take note of the name. And that is why we have been able to ensure that we follow the years now. Because you take note of the name, but that also happens elsewhere. So we don't know what happens on the ground. So we have eliminated all of that. If persons are following up, it has to be the individual themselves. No third party is following up. Even at our office level, we're not meeting anybody who's coming on behalf of anyone. But there are legitimate, sometimes legitimate concerns, issues, problems the persons face with that you have to deal with. But at a minimal, we reduce seeing persons because we want the system to work. And that is some of the additional measures we have met. In terms of, I have seen, because I have seen in terms of the news, and the latest I know, on the one matter that was reported, that is still, we have not gotten back feedback in terms of the one matter that was reported to the police, and Minister Roger probably could be able to expand, but we have not gotten a feedback, and that's where it is. My knowledge of the staff is not on the job, obviously. I've obviously suspended, I would think. Terminated, I've still since. But as we get the complaints, we address them and we deal with them. The other issue you ask, oh, the pending applicants. Yes, sir. Let me get an update because, yeah, go ahead and ask them.
Just 1 staff for 2023 would have been terminated as a result of malpractice with regards to promises made to applicants
No,
that
so,
they will
so
got.
yeah, let me differentiate because I differentiate. You've had one public or publicly known one. That is one that we're referring to. But there have been, in my recollection, at least 2. Not for the similar allocation issue, but delinquent and for other issues that we have terminated. For example, we have had one community development staff, or no, enforcement, sorry, who would have said misappropriated the use of his firearm, put it that way. And that staff has been dealt with. So as the direct complaints come, we address them. But then I have seen one that, for example, that says money is collected and the person can't see their land. You just heard the explanation, and that it is so. And we do not show people their land until they must, when we show you, that means you can immediately occupy your lot.
We're trying to get the number of pending applications.
Yeah,
We're just
active. No, your word is active, so that's one we just.
active applicants, yeah.
No, the reason why, because if you go to our system now, it will tell you 80-something thousand plus applicants. But those are not necessarily active applicants. Those persons who are there, for one reason or the other, has not come up because we don't delete. We don't delete applicants, despite what some of the things I hear, all right?
On the same matter with the employee that was terminated, there were a number of allegations leveled at several staff members. But you would appreciate that we cannot take definitive action based on allegations. And that's why, obviously, we would examine these individuals more closely. There were engagements with them. They were interviewed in-house to find out if they are willing to offer any explanations as to why these allegations were being made against them. But obviously, if you don't have proof of any corrupt activities, there's no possibility for us to just terminate somebody based on allegations. Anybody can pick up a phone and send a message or level an allegation against someone, and that is why we keep pleading with members of the public to please come forward with any solid information that you have or evidence that you have of any staff member or anyone claiming to be able to get an allocation for you in exchange for monies. And so we were able to get evidence on one employee. That's the one that, in relation to the statement I made, she was arrested. She was questioned and I believe put on bail. The last I know is that the file is with the DPP, so I assume the police is waiting for the return of that file before charging her. But that's the last update that I have. But from our side, we have taken definitive action and she has been terminated. These investigations are ongoing because if people come forward and make accusations or allegations, we encourage them to provide us with some form of evidence so we can take definitive action in that regard. And just to say as well that many of the people who make complaints or allegations on social media are people who have given somebody, a middleman or a third party, money in exchange for land and have not gotten through. They have not. Because the person they paid does not have the authority to allocate them lands. So that's why you see them taking to social media. When that scheme has failed, they take to social media to say that they've paid monies and they have not received their allocation. So people have to be wary of that. People have to be very conscious of that. Anybody with their application prior or up to 2019 can come into the ministry. There is no need for people to pay bribes for house lots. That's what we keep reiterating all the time. And we are there. They can elevate their appeal if they're not getting satisfactory treatment from the staff there. We have our secretariats and our staff who are always willing to assist them. So that's the update that I have.
Sorry. Sir. Yeah, I also want to, on the same subject, to allude to a statement that was issued on the November 23rd in the name of the Permanent Secretary, but has the blessings of the ministers. I just want to remind you on that statement, and it clearly outlines our position on these matters. The pending question that was asked about pending applicants, active applicants, 63,032. This would be taking all the years into consideration, right? And I did allude to that there are 13, in this our tenure, there were 13,000 new applicants.
Thank you, Minister. Next question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sure,
Okay.
So, we have done an assessment of the area. And based on that, we have been able to respond. The persons, there are two categories that persons have opted for. One, land. We have identified the land, and the land is in the Diamond area. And we have already conducted allocations exercises for some of those persons that came in. Then there are some we have been pushing for the housing program, and they were given the letters for the banks, and that's where we are. So we're currently reviewing what the banks review in terms to be able, if they can pre-qualify, because some of them are established persons who are working, right? And so they can be able, obviously, to pre-qualify. Our logging that we have done, and by the way, it's for households. So when we do our exercises, it's take the households, this is taken into consideration. So the family size, on average, I guess, will be times about 4. But we have checked there at least 285 households on that stretch.
Thank you, Minister. Next question.
Morning, Vanu Manakchand, the Guyana Times. Minister, can you give an update on the implementation of the single window system? You barely mentioned it earlier. And also on the home construction program. There have been complaints about delays and sometimes shoddy works and even overcharging by the contractors, sometimes who even subcontract these works. Can you say how the ministry is monitoring this?
Let me answer the last one first. So you would have heard Minister Rodriguez alluding to the challenges, or some of the challenges in terms of the construction. And yes, we have had issues and complaints. And so that is why from our level with the project department, the monitoring aspect has been improved. We have had issues on the direct complaints by about 2 contractors on our program that we have since had to go after. In one case, we've had to send legal documents to that contractor. And I'm told he also owes other persons. Now, there are 2 types of persons who benefit from the housing program, or categories, I should say. There are, which is the majority, are those that comes through the banks. So in essence, the releases is done in tranche. Well, if you know the banking system, they don't issue one time. Then the second aspect, there are some cash payments. But some persons may probably choose to pay more than the quantity of works up front. So in one contractor case, and which I think you're alluding to, one contractor case, there are about 5 beneficiaries that we are addressing, that for which we are seeking to recover that money, which meaning we have terminated the contractor. Secondly, we are levying on to be able to recover the necessary money that is required, so we have on par. And then the other one is someone who is doing work at the LBI proximity for the young professional, and that person would have received, because they were engaged in the bank, they would have received their first tranche from the bank and didn't do the level of work that was required. So that is being addressed. But it does not take away that, yes, there are legitimate complaints about some of the quality of work that has been done. And that's why I said to you, we have done some reinforcing at our level, meaning the projects department, because there are what you call clerker works now that we have taken on board, increased clerker works, to help with monitoring. because you realize the amount of projects we were doing, etc., the projects department, we had to increase the staffing of the project department. And the monitoring is required on the spot. So they are now required to have weekly visits to the particularly assigned areas that they may have so that we can rectify some of these issues. But we've had challenges in terms of contractors. It is a fact. One of which the contractors have said is that the cost for those houses at the respective level is too minimal, too low. That's a reality. So they have expressed their challenges. Two, many of them have expressed challenges in terms of labor, which the whole country has in terms of labor shortage, despite you going to some communities and you see persons hanging around doing nothing. So some of them have expressed labor shortages. But by and large, yes, you're correct, and we are addressing them. The single window processing, we have completed all our preliminary work in the set that are required. That is, one, legislation, so that's complete, except one aspect which I'll tell you. And secondly, the awareness, that is with the stakeholders, meaning the local authorities, the regional systems, as well as some of the agencies that will be required in the approvals. So we have done those sort of sensitization with them. Where we are now is in terms of finalization on the ICT platform that is required for us to go live. That's all that is required. Well, of course, when that happens, we will have to gazette. So that's why I said there's only one aspect of the legal that has been done. We'll gazette to say this is the commencement date, because you'll have to issue a commencement order. But for the legitimacy of the single window, we have done that. That has been passed in Parliament. And so very soon you will see that into implementation.
Thank you, Minister. Next question.
Good morning, Minister Kroll. Anasa Williams, Kaiser News. Kaiser News did an investigative piece in August 2023 on the young professional homes in the Prospect area with substandard work. Minister, can you say if the issue has been rectified and also what inspective measures were put in place before these homes were handed over to these individuals?
Your report, the contractor is one of the contractors I alluded to. That if you did the report, but whatever the Kaichur News report, that house was one of the contractor. And we, as I said, we have engaged individually with each one of the beneficiary in terms of being able to resolve these outstanding matters. The last part of your question was, what was that? What was your second part of your question? Oh.
Thank you, Minister. Next.
Good morning, Minister. Antonio de Starbuck News. I just have one question. In relation to the person, the employee that was terminated, I was made to understand that Minister Rodriguez would have defended another employee, a young man. I cannot remember his name, but I just wanted to clarify, is he still on the job?
That employee that you say that I defended, I merely presented the facts. That employee was the employee that was approached by the other employee who was subsequently arrested. So he facilitated the investigation with the police. When she approached him to set up a scheme to help her to get house lots to allocate other people, he reported the matter to me. I advised him to report it immediately to the police. We called in the police. We gave all the information to the police, and the sting was set up. So recordings were made, and all of the evidence gathered that would lead to the arrest of the other employee. So the employee that I spoke publicly about is the one that was facilitating the investigation with the police. And when the arrests were made, the allottees were also arrested, the people who came in under the guise of legitimately selecting the house lot. One of those persons was also arrested. The person who paid the bribe was also arrested, and the employee who set up the entire thing.
Thank you, Minister. We're going to try to wrap up shortly. The next question, thank you.
Nakasia Logan, NCN News. Minister, the question is outside of what you addressed, but within the ambit of the housing ministry. Can you address, Ministry of Labor addressed yesterday in a press conference that they will be moving to issue land titles for co-op scheme homeowners in that area. Can you speak to that, and maybe how many are you looking to address in 2024?
The definitive numbers for those under the co-op, because that cannot be dealt with in isolation. So for us to give you a number, we would not be able to, because as I said, that there has to be, for those under the co-op, first of all, there has to have an agreement by those persons in the area, or the beneficiaries in that case, an agreement that that's the modality that they want to be addressed. But we have, as a government, been pushing the policy of to be able to address many of them, because you'll recognize there are a lot of areas for which persons do not have that legitimate or legal document simply under that falls under the co-op, and that is why that process has to be led by the labor, because they will provide the necessary information, and then we engage the communities. That's when we come in after. We're in the final stage of that. There has to have some preliminary agreement and approval, or that this is a modality they want to go.
Thank you, Minister. We'll take one more question, and okay.
Senika Torn, DPA. Minister, could you say the cement and steel program, could you say how much persons benefited from that program this year? And will that program be continuing, last year, sorry, and will that program be continuing in 2024?
The steel and cement program is ongoing. Yes, it will continue. We have, let me get that information on the steel and cement. Just one shortly, I'll get that for you, the exact detail. So we have issued vouchers for over 962 of those steel and cement program. 962. Of course, there are about 2,000 plus that have applied, or put it this way, registered. We have done site visits of over 1,000 plus, but we have issued 962, and yes, it's ongoing. So of that value, we have paid out over $132 million to date under this program, this initiative.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll have the final question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Kurt Campbell, Newsroom again. Minister, as the final question, can you comment on the performance of your new permanent secretary seated beside you, and also the absence of the CEO, Mr. Greaves?
The new, our new permanent secretary has been doing quite well. In fact, we've given him some additional tasks and responsibilities, and one of which, let me make this point, one of which is the very question or the scenario that you've been asking us. So he has a little training in his own way, and so he has been engaging staff of the Ministry and Central Housing and Planning Authority directly with a view of addressing some of those complaints that we have, both legitimate, illegal, whatever you want. And so we want to say congratulations to him. He has hit the ground running. And so you recognize he has a little army background. He did serve a little in the army. So that he's the right person for some of those challenges we are confronted daily on the ground there. Secondly, it's just coincidental because he's on annualized leave. No other qualms. So he's actually overseas. So he'll be back on the Monday the 8th, that is. Yeah, bright and early. But we we have Dennis Tudor, who's filling in, doing quite well. Is that the final one? All right, so for both of us, we'll start our roundup then. Yes. Let me say thank you so much. It's not often do we show an appreciation to members of the media. Sometimes people look at media, they think that it's only about reporting the negative aspect. In fact, you help to provide clarity for some of the questions that citizens may ask. And so certainly we see the media as an enabler or an enabling environment to have this done. And likewise, when we have our activities, we will be able to reach out to you. And I'm pretty sure when Minister speaks, she'll tell you we are pretty much accessible. But sometimes we do like for the issues to be, the relevant sections or the persons to deal with some of those issues. And to the listening public, we want to say that you have a government that is caring. You have a government that is working hard every day, not just us at the housing and water sector, but for all sectors that requires development of our people. And at the end of the day, our focus is all people-centered. All of this is geared towards improving the lives of our citizens, allowing them to have a better quality of life. And that is what we work every day to do. And to the staff, the hard-working staff for the Ministry of Housing and Water, and then special recognition for those that fall on the Central Housing and Planning Authority, Guyana Water, Inc. We want to ask them to continue to do the work they've been doing diligently. Criticism sometimes is good because it's to take cognizance of constructive criticism that helps to improve performance. And so that's something that is always welcome. The nature of both agencies will tell you they too are people-centered because they have to deal with customers, best beneficiaries, etc. So they're interfacing with the members of the public every day. So they are, sometimes we get the cushion, but they are seeing the brunt of sometimes a disgruntled customer, an impatient potential beneficiary or house lot applicant. So they get to see the modes of different type of persons, right? And so we want to say to them, continue the work that they're doing. And my final comment is, if you think we have worked hard enough last year, you will tell us, because you are the reviewer. We are endeavoring to work even harder this year to implement our ongoing programs and policies, as well as our upcoming ones, what we would expect, obviously, when you have a budget presented. So we look forward to an exciting 2024 as we are on the other side of the curve of our first 5-year tenure. Note I said first, right? First 5-year tenure. And so obviously it is very important to continue to reassess where we're going and measure what is happening, and to ensure that we don't lose the steam, the energy, and the vibrancy that is required, but to keep everybody on the same level playfully. Thank you so much.
Just to say thank you as well to the members of the media. I know sometimes you get bored listening to us because you're with us all year and at all of the activities, but you still do it with a smile on your face, Kurt. So thank you to everybody for always supporting us, because if you do something and you don't tell anybody about it, it's like you didn't do it. And that's why, having the platform to speak to people as often as possible. Obviously, we're not speaking to the members of the media alone. We're speaking to every Guyanese who has an interest in this ministry and in the work of the government as a whole. I always believe that it's very important that people have information, and that guides their understanding of what is happening in terms of the overall vision and for the delivery of services in the housing and water sectors. There is a lot of work that was done, and there's a lot of work that's still remaining to be done, especially in the water sector as well, for us to improve the standard and the level of service and in the delivery of clean water to citizens of our country across the different regions, and reliable water, as was mentioned before. Every time you turn on the tap, you want there to be water, regardless of whether it's daytime or nighttime. And we're working to achieve that. And the good thing is that the plans are in motion, and that's what people need to know, that the plans are underway. It's not just about speaking to people about a vision, but with them knowing that there are ongoing projects that will see the realization of these objectives in a very short time. And that goes for the housing sector as well. So thank you to the members of the media for your support, and I'd like to echo similar sentiments and to thank the staff, hardworking staff of the Ministry of Housing and Water, our respective secretariats, the permanent secretary, the CEOs, all of the heads of department for both CHPA and GWI, our board members, because I believe the two boards, CHPA and GWI boards, are perhaps two of the most hardworking boards in the country, because they meet often, and we rely heavily on their guidance and approvals as well. So I want to thank them publicly, and a lot of the work that you see us doing is a result, a culmination of a lot of backroom work done by these staff and board members. So I wish to thank them as well for their service over the last 3 years, and some of them have been serving in this sector for decades. So it wouldn't show on their faces. They still seem pretty young, but they have some decades under their belt. So I thank them wholeheartedly, and we do have a lot more work ahead of us as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Honorable Ministers Kroll and Minister Rodriguez, for presenting the program's achievements and future plans of the Ministry of Housing and Water and responding to the questions asked today. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope that this session has provided valuable insights into the ministry's ongoing works and efforts. On behalf of the ministry again, I'd like to thank each one of you for attending, and we look forward to future opportunities to engage the press. And I did not state it before, but Happy New Year to each one of you. May this be a productive and enjoyable new year. Thank you very much.